Hello, welcome. Let's see, I think we're all here. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, welcome. So I'm here in my studio for my first season 2 studio diary. So if you're new here, welcome. If you watched last year and into a little bit of 2020 as well, I come to you and talk about my creative practice and share some of my process and share some of my life process too, which I feel like all weave together super beautifully. I'm going to turn on a little light here so that when I flip the camera, you will be able to see the work that I am doing. So today I'm going to be talking about light to dark and dark to light, and the ways that you can use watercolors to do that. So often in watercolor building, sorry, let me just arrange this so it's not super wonky right now. Boop. Okay, so in watercolors, there's a couple of ways to approach things, right? If you're new to watercolors, my best advice is to play. Just play. That's how I've learned. I did go to school for a little bit for visual art, meaning, well, my path in collegiate world was a little non-linear. So I ended up studying visual art for about a year under like the whole professorship thing. And then I decided, because of a really negative experience and also just following my heart, that I was gonna study art history. So I ended up getting my degree in art history. And a lot of the things that I do as a visual artist, I've learned on my own by experimenting and playing. So here is some play. With watercolor, the thing about watercolors that I know from my students can be intimidating, and my own personal experience too, is that it feels like you can't mess up. Like you have to have a precise plan for your watercolors before you actually use them, because you can't erase and they're really particular. And so that's why I wanted to talk about watercolors a little bit, because in season 1 of this, when I did this last year before having to shut everything down in March, I had a lot of questions about watercolors. They can be intimidating, I guess, and I totally get it. So part of my process with making art, and part of my life process too, is how can I work with the mistakes, right? Like what will really serve me as I live through the mistakes, question the conflict that arises from within maybe having the mistakes, and then make something beautiful from it. Because that's the thing, is like, maybe we can make something beautiful from what we perceive as mistakes or trial and error, and maybe a stopping point in the process of life, of creating. So I'm gonna flip the camera, and so it'll be like you're looking from the other side of my table as I make, and you can listen along. And if you wanna do art along with me, you can. But I'm gonna go ahead and flip this. Give me a moment to this might be a little wobbly, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, that's pretty good, right? I think so. Okay, yes, awesome. So here I have two pieces of watercolor or heavy stock paper that are hot pressed, about 150 pound, meaning that they're heavier weight. They're not the heaviest weight. paper you can get, and when we're talking about weight, we're just really talking about thickness of paper. And they are about 5 by 7, I think, in size. And I'm gonna tape them down just so that as I'm doing this, things stay consistent on the screen for you. Just putting a little painter's tape on 2 of the corners and making sure that my surface isn't super dirty. I'm not really extremely particular about that. I know a lot of artists can be. That's something that I deal with as I identify myself as someone who makes art, is like learning from this particular canon of like precision, and then how do you find your space while you make a mess. So this paper has a little bit of glue on the top from another piece of paper it was attached to. And you know, working with the flaws, right? That's part of this process today. And if you have any questions, please ask me. I will when I flip the camera over soon, I will answer them. I'll look through them and answer them. So I'm gonna start on this piece of paper going from dark to light. And what I mean is I'm gonna put down a dark color and add light. And on this one, I'm gonna start light to dark. And what's gonna happen is you'll see maybe how different they look even though they're using the same colors. This is my watercolor palette. You can buy watercolor palettes pretty much that look like this with a variety of hues and pigments. This is like a complexion series. So it's something that's, I was looking for really muted colors and colors that were earthy for a project I was doing last year called Real Mantras. Those are all on my website where I wrote down things I tell myself, like maybe this will turn out okay, and I made art from it instead of like, life is beautiful, keep on going, which I believe in. But I don't often say that to myself. Okay, I think I said I'm going dark to light here and light to dark. So that's what I'm gonna do now because I can't remember what I said. So this is just a nylon synthetic big watercolor brush. Sometimes the brushes are made from horsehair, but I prefer synthetic right now for this purpose. And then this is some just water. I'm gonna put the water down first on the paper and add my watercolor in. This helps to create, the water helps to create a barrier. So what I'm gonna do here over in my palette is just add some water in between. I know there's like palette, other ways to do that with like a palette, what do you call it, thing? But this is how I'm doing it. Okay, so I just added water to the black, and now I'm gonna add the black to the paper. This is a really, really kind of deep black color. And since the paper is wet, it lends this really flowy and cloud-like, celestial-like situation. So some of the paper over here is not wet. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave a little space in between where I'm laying down the pigment. Adding a little bit more water. And so I'm gonna put that down there. My table is tilted just a tiny bit, so all the water is gonna slant towards that way, if you can see that happening. I have a drafting table that has some heavy stuff on that side, so it's just a slight bit. Oh, okay, so now I'm gonna add light. I accidentally just put that into the black. So I'm gonna go with like a really peachy color on this palette, just because it's maybe the lightest one on the palette, and add it in. And so again, the paper is wet, so it's gonna lend this flowy and kind of messy-ish situation. Like this is not super planned, but I'm gonna add the pigment in between the dark, right? And I'm leaving a tiny bit of border between where I put my brush and the black ink that's already down, because I don't want necessarily things to get super blendy like right here. Then it gets creamy. So I can go back in with a smaller brush once things dry and either add the peach light color all the way to the dark or push the dark down, if that makes sense. So this is placing dark down first and then adding light. And you know, I'm talking about this being kind of a life philosophy too. And sometimes in life we are in the darkness, right? We're kind of in that contemplative, maybe not knowing what's next space. The dark moon, the trusting your senses time. And you have to push in the light. Like you have to push in some things that remind you of your joy, remind you of some truths that you've had with joy. Like one of the things that I'm working with right now in my life is trusting the feelings of joy as much as I trust the feelings of grief. Trusting the feelings of joy as much as I trust the feelings of grief. So that's a practice, y'all. I know y'all know. You're not here just not knowing that. And I tend to be somebody who, when I remember or when I feel some grief or sorrow or sadness, I feel like that's the truth. And then when I'm feeling joy, I tend to be like, what's gonna happen next? Or, well, this is fleeting. And I mean, I say this and it feels pretty vulnerable to say, but I also know that I'm not alone. Okay, so I'm gonna pick up my brush and add the dark pigment all the way. Since this brush has a nice fine tip, where is it? There we go. I'm gasping because I thought I'm not on screen anymore. I can't see. Okay, can you see that? Yes, I think so. So it has a nice fine tip at the edge, and then we can go back in and work in this dark all the way to the end. So yeah, there's like a study, probably many out there, that when you feel something and you feel like, gosh, maybe I'm the only person that feels this, I think it's like 80% of other people feel it too, because we're way more connected than we give ourselves credit for. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this here. I can work in the darks, the dark contrast a little bit better once the watercolor dries. And watercolor dries like, I wanna say that it's like 50% lighter than when it's wet. I could be wrong with that. There's a statistic out there as well about that. So in this one, I'm gonna go light to dark, and we're gonna talk about how that looks different. Maybe it won't look different. I'm gonna grab my palette closer to me so I'm not dripping on that one that's up there. And so yeah, so for this one I'm gonna do the same thing where I add some water down first. And see, with the heavier stock paper, there's a less buckling. I did this series last year where I would make art with my students live. So we'd be on Zoom and we'd be doing art making together and talking about life. And I remember one of my students being like, my paper is buckling, I don't like that. And so we were using a lighter weight paper, but it does buckle. Water, it absorbs the water like a sponge no matter what. So maybe if you can see the buckling sometimes as part of the process, how does that feel? Okay, I'm gonna add the light first. So here we go. kind of similar pattern to what's above, but I'm gonna go and just do it. So when you're working with light to dark, in drawing and illustration, there are a couple ways to do that, and maybe we'll do that another time. We'll use graphite pencil. Okay, adding the dark over here. So tell me, do you feel like it feels different than the other one, or is it kind of similar? Drop me a comment. If you're watching live, if you're watching later. I find that when I'm trying to work in the dark from the light, I can't get it dark enough. So what does that mean in life philosophy too, in life musing? Like if you're feeling that light, if you're feeling kind of joyful, if you're feeling optimistic and you try to put some dark in there, does it penetrate as much? Does it move through as much? Does it last as long? I don't know, you tell me. They're kind of looking similar, right? Right? It's really strange not having any feedback from, I've been doing some one-on-one sessions for so long. So I'm gonna leave this here for just a moment. And it is hard to see on the, from the internet screen. But the light, or the dark on here, because there's so much more water and there's less room for it to kind of be the main focus, it is a little bit lighter. So these will dry, and if you stay tuned to my channel here, that's the right word to say. I'm gonna flip this up so we can talk some more. Then you will see the dried result. Okay, so that's working dark to light. And I really encourage you, if you're a visual artist, to play with that, with watercolor, or if you are an illustrator and not using watercolors, like putting graphite, just total graphite down on a page and erasing, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's like pulling it out from the dark, from the saturation is probably a better word, like whatever is already there. Like how can you maybe desaturate through some tools or through some manipulation of your art medium substrate. Okay, loves, so I will be coming on here live probably every week if everything works out. Planning at this time of year, time of life, COVID, all of that. It's a bit of a challenge. I mean, I can do it, right? We can plan, and also we have to hold space for the openness of it not working out. I love you, I really do, and I appreciate your time. I see some people joined and popped off. I'm gonna check and see if there are any comments. I don't see any right now. Thank you for everybody who joined, and if you're watching later, holler at me. Let me know what you think. Thanks, y'all. See you soon.